Hello, good morning, Mr. Jose Sanchez. Thank you for accepting our interview. First of all, I would like to ask what is your background and what are your responsibilities at AEVP?
Okay, so I am an architect by training from the University of Lisbon, where I did my bachelor and master's. After that, I did a PhD in the Hafen City University in Hamburg, focusing on port-city relationships from issues connected to planning, but also to overall governance strategies. Since 2016, I work for AABP with different roles. Today, I am director of the Agenda 2030, which is mostly one of the three departments of ABP, focusing on the content production and coordination of our participation in international initiatives, from international projects to other cooperation with international organizations such as the United Nations, the European Union, OCDE, and so on.
Thank you very much. Thank you for accepting the interview. Your expertise and your professionality is very useful for us for the SEANERGY project. If you want, I will start with my questions. My first question is, given your expertise in port-city relations, what role do port cities play in the wider European transition to greener ports, especially in the SEANERGY project framework?
So for AVP, it is very clear that ports and port cities play a leading role in this. On this green energy transition, in the sense that the maritime industry is one of the few global sectors that have jointly decided to move forward new types of fuel, to test new types of fuels and energy carrier solutions. These, of course, require certain changes in the landside infrastructure, which means ports, and also in ports themselves, as also industrial hubs. You can see that there is a very specific push and pressure as well towards a green energy transition to reduce the impact that not just port activities, but also industrial activities have in the general, in society as a whole. Additionally, for cities, it is clear that the fact of being close to hubs, innovation hubs such as ports, where many of these changes are taking place, could mean significant benefits to being the front line on these technological changes. This is something that we are seeing in different European projects. We are seeing it, for example, also in the Magpie project. Of course, also entails certain challenges. New technology sometimes can create a certain, I wouldn't say opposition, but mistrust by society, because we are familiarized to being close to a gasoline station or to a gasoline deposit or gas deposit, but people tend to be scared when they say it's a hydrogen or ammonia facility, which perhaps is not even as dangerous, but it is new. So people might show a certain mistrust on this new technology. So this is the part that port cities need to work on. But for us, it's very clear that they are innovation hubs, and they play a leading role. Just one more thing that I would like to add on this: the fact that there is, in the majority of European ports, a port-city connection increases the pressure on ports to be greener. If the port would be in an isolated location, as some academics and experts in the past predicted, that big ports would be isolated because they would be more efficient and wouldn't have to be surrounded by the urban area, the fact that they still remain in the urban areas increases the pressure towards a faster and more efficient transition. So this is something that for us is also very clear, and it's interesting how this connection that some people saw in the past as potential hindrance and a problem for the commercial and infrastructural evolution of the port actually now plays a very important role to accelerate this transition.
Okay, thank you very much. Moving to my next question. From an educational standpoint, what types of training or qualifications do you see as essential for ensuring a seamless port energy transition?
I think they're on different levels of training that must occur. The first steps, of course, is on technical knowledge regarding the energy that are being implemented, and also in the designing or planning of industrial infrastructure or maritime infrastructure. This is, I think, the most obvious one, connected to engineering from a, say, high technical point of view, but also for the workers that are directly on the field. This is even connected, for example, when we talk about onshore power supply, or when we talk about offshore, also offshore wind power. That is where ports are also playing a very important role, for example. It requires a very specific kind of expertise. Further on, there is also kind of training in terms of increasing the efficiency of the port and maritime actions or processes that are implemented. And this is general. This is broad, not just for the more technical workers that are directly on the field, but also for the general workforce in terms of how they can do the same operation, saving energy, or what processes can be rethought in order to reduce the impact that they may have.
Thank you. My next question is, as cities look to greener ports, how can they best engage and collaborate with expert groups like AVP to develop holistic and sustainable transition strategy, in your opinion?
How can cities work with AVP, or how can cities work with ports?
How can they can engage and collaborate with expert groups like AVP?
Okay. The departure point of AVP has always been sharing good practices and also bad practices. Perhaps the good practices are a bit more visible and easier to share. The bad practices are perhaps shared more in private discussions. But in any case, that is, I would say, the key departure point. If a port city had a good or bad experience in the development of a specific green solution or new energy, new sustainable energy solution, I think this is the key, and this is where, for example, we also have the transfer of knowledge from ports that have become specialized on a specific type of energy, and how now ports that are arriving a bit later to the place, they can benefit from the experience of these other ports. This is a bit the spirit of AVP and the spirit of working groups that we have developed on different topics. Further on, it's important to, as I was saying, for example, with the social acceptability of new technologies, that is also another field where AVP can support in terms of setting the ground for the social integration of new technologies that can contribute for the green transition. And this is a part of the work that we are also doing in the MACPI consortium, where more than 10 different types of technologies are being tested in specific port environments, and we are going to work on this direction. Further on, we can also support in the assessment of the impact that green transition technologies can have on the port cities, from the configuration of the landscape to the existing infrastructure and its capacity and availability, to the working as a network. This is something that we also need to understand. Perhaps not all ports need to become hydrogen powerhouses, and not all are suited for that. So it's a matter also of working as a network. And for that, I think there is also a possibility. And further on, an ambition in the medium longer term is also to set specific guidelines or step-by-step approaches that we can prepare based on the experiences of the members and port cities all over the world, and how others can learn in the process. We have our Agenda 2030 based on these 10 goals. One of them is the energy transition. The goal is to go farther in each one of these goals in order to develop specific literature for this. And literature not meaning scientific literature. For that, there are much more capacitated institutions out there, but based more on the projects that have been developed, and then developing very pragmatical approaches or guidelines for the different port cities.
Thank you. My next question, in scope of the energy transition, which sectors within the port industry do you anticipate will experience significant job growth or diversification?
Which sectors of the port?
Within the port industry, which sector, yes? In the port industry.
But sorry, growth in terms of the
job growth.
Job growth.
Job growth.
Okay. In terms of particularly in the ports that are today fossil fuel bases, for example, like the Port of Rotterdam or Port of Antwerp, or port where this sector plays a big role, there is where I think it's going to be a more immediate effect in short term, because it's where the change of fuels might happen quicker, where these industries will probably need new kind of professionals working in them, or perhaps it's not a matter of new kinds of professionals, but more the transformation and education and training of the existing professionals. That is one thing, to deal with the new kind of fuels and technology. That is one thing. The other thing that we also see then, but it's difficult for me to foresee, is, for example, when we talk about the usage of onshore power supply for cruises or for cargo ships. This is as far as I know, is a position that the team that is in charge of this operation did not exist before, because this is a completely new technology that is being provided. I don't think it's going to have such a big impact, but it's going to have a big role, because it's the position or the main technology that we see in, for example, in the European context, that is now being implemented for the short-term results, as the evolution of fuels will take a bit longer. But in terms of providing the electricity onshore, the technology is already prepared in that sense. So there is a new kind of professional that will exist in that field. Then, for example, when we talk about the ports becoming hubs for the energy transition on solutions that are not now on, let's say, traditional port activities. For example, when we talk about offshore wind farms, this requires a connection to land. And this connection usually happens in ports. This is what you see in the area of Normandy and Le Havre. This is a new type of facility that requires a new types of professional in terms of more on the industrial background, more than specifically maritime, but still these are activities that will happen inside the port, because the proximity plays an important role, and the final preparation of the technology to be implemented on the field happens inside the port. And in these cases, we're talking about quite big numbers in terms of different professionals that can take place, can work in this field. This, of course, will not be in every single port. This is something that what we are learning, I think, from the energy transition is that while until now we had one solution mostly, which was oil-based products, what we see now is that we're going to have very different kind of solutions for energy carriers, from LNG to hydrogen to using electricity coming from sustainable sources. And this diversification is going to require different profile of ports. It's going to require different profile of industries and different profiles of professionals working in these ports. And this is going to be, I think, one of the main challenges because each port will have to find its niche a little bit.
Okay, thank you. Another question is the concept of a circular economy is becoming increasingly pivotal in urban planning. Can you mention some examples on how ports can become key contributors to this circular economy within their respective cities?
Yes, of course. One of my favorite examples is something that started in the Port of Rotterdam, but now it's seen in other ports, and is the use of residual heat from industrial processes and how this can be directed towards the heating infrastructure of neighborhoods. And this is a technology that has already existed for several years. I'm not so sure if a decade, but definitely several years. Started, as far as I know, in Port of Rotterdam, but we see more ports that are starting to use it. I think Le Havre already also has it, and there are other cases. And this is a perfect example of circular economy because we're using something that we were wasting onto the atmosphere that perhaps was not as harmless and as dangerous as debris or toxic waste, but still something that we're wasting. And instead, we are able to capture it and through pipeline infrastructure, redirect it towards the heating of neighborhoods, urban neighborhoods, meaning that these urban settlements are benefiting of the proximity to the port by having a heating system that is sustainable using something that was going to be wasted, which is the heat. I think this is, to me, one of the most simple but brilliant examples of how being close to a port can be beneficial for the city. There are other examples focusing on waste, reusing waste, a bit, I would say, perhaps a bit more in an early stage. For example, it's reusing plastic that has been found on the water on the port and how it can be recycled for other uses. But I think for that, so far, the examples that I've known have been more exploratory than really large-scale industrial-based. There are cases like, for example, the port of Strasbourg, which is not a huge port compared to the cases of Hamburg, Rotterdam, and so on. But they do have specific agreements among the port community to establish circular economy processes so that the companies in the port are aware of the waste that is being generated by other companies as to how it could potentially be used, not just for that, but also in terms of being more efficient. What I like about this, not the specific technology that is being used about it, is the fact that it is a work that has been developed with the port community in itself. So it points us toward the efficiency of the production processes inside port areas.
Thank you. My next question. The port industry, like many, is undergoing a cultural shift. In your opinion, what strategies or initiatives can be adopted to enhance gender equality for women within this sector?
I think it's something that has to happen on several levels. The basic one is from the most early stages on the educational system to show that not just port, but all STEM fields, science, technology, and math fields, are for both genders. That is, I would say, the departure point is to show, and this connects to showing how, from the early stages of the educational path, kids, I'm talking about children, to get girls and boys equally familiarized with the maritime world. This is something that we defend in port centers from the beginning. And this is something that is fundamental, that breaking from the beginning the idea that the port and maritime sector is focused on men and mainly jobs and so on. This is a cultural step that needs to be taken right at the beginning. And from this has to happen, then this has to be accompanied along the industry. The majority of the work of the jobs that are going to happen in the port industry in the coming decades are not going to be based on muscle and brute force. They're going to be based on skill, computational skill perhaps, on critical thinking, on engineering skills. And this really, it doesn't have a gender. For that, I think it's also important to show this on the different levels of education, from children very young to primary, secondary, and high school, showing how the maritime fields can be an interesting way to develop a job. That is, I would say, the base. Further on, it's a matter also, and we see it on having hiring policies that can be directed towards increasing the diversity of the workforce. This is always a balance, because I think it's a matter of having also qualified professional, but then as it happens in many other fields, I think it's important to set targets for each industry, for each port, for each company, in terms of wanting what kind of profile do we want, and how can we increase the diversity of the workforce. In equal hiring positions, I'm not so sure if it's something that should be discriminate or should ignore men, but this is something that should be encouraged. Then it's also about enhancing career steps or career paths inside the companies itself. One of the main problems we see also is that we lack today women in leading roles as well. If you look, for example, at port authorities in Italy, I don't think there is one single woman president of the port authority, as far as I know. I know there are women in other important positions, general secretary of different port authorities and so on, and heads of technical departments. If you look in Spain, there are some examples. Right now, very recently, Martao became the president of the Port of Valencia, the biggest port in Spain. There is also, until not long ago, there was the president of the Port of Huelva that was also a woman. The president of the Port of Cadiz is also a woman. But still, in the leading positions, is very much men-dominated. And I think this is important inside the port authorities, inside the institutions, inside the companies, to have also career paths that can encourage women to take also these leading roles. This is something that is clear. And another one, finally, just to conclude, and this perhaps is more of a personal opinion. I have a 2-year-old daughter, and I have seen how demanding it is. I have seen how demanding it is to be a mother. And I think it's crucial to have family balance policies that can take out the pressure of women that inevitably are women that have the children, that is clear, and are women that can breastfeed. But at some point, it is important to try to find a balance that the parents equally share the burden, and that there is the flexibility that doesn't affect the career of the woman. So that somebody that is in a position that's starting perhaps to take more important roles inside a big structure like port authority or something like that, when you are in your mid-30s, for example, doesn't have to make a choice between being a mother or having a career in the maritime sector. I don't know what is your position as a woman. I know that I am the interviewee, but this is what I have been learning.
Of course, I totally agree.
It's a bit personal. It's a bit personal, but this is what I see. That I think is unfair that until 2 young professionals are in their 30s, the career evolution path can be similar. But then at some point, Mother Nature forces a certain choice among us. You want or not want to have children. And it's an important decision that depends mostly on the woman and what she wants to do with her body. If she decides to have a children, she should not be punished for having a child. She should receive the support in order to be able to continue a career path in case this is what she desires. Because I think this is the only way that you're going to have people, women, in leading roles more often and more visible. Otherwise, it puts a tremendous pressure and burden on the shoulders of a woman. But this is a man talking about women, so I don't think I'm the most indicated in any case.
I do agree, totally. I will jump to my last question. Drawing from AVP's experience, can you share case studies or examples where port cities exemplify the best practices in sustainable development and port city collaboration for greener energy?
There are several examples that can be quoted. One is it's more circular economy, is the one that I mentioned before about the heating system. But we see, for example, in the pressure towards cruises. For example, this happens a bit also on the cooperation between port and city. And the pressure you see in Lisbon, they are trying to develop the onshore power supply also to respond to demands on the city. Not that there is a technical cooperation in that sense, but there is a certain dialogue based on that. We see also examples of in Marseille, there is something quite concrete, is a cooperation between port city and the development company on how to have technical facilities inside the port that can use the water from the bay in order to be used for the heating and cooling system of the close neighborhood. And this could only happen because there was a cooperation between the city, the developer, the energy company, and the port authority in order to facilitate the access to the water, the reuse of this water, and the presence of the technical facilities and the connection across all these levels. And this is in the case of Marseille. Other cases, I think, if I remember correctly, but I would have to check this. I'm talking a bit out of my the case of Bilbao, if I remember correctly, they have, I think, 4 or 5 large-scale wind energy generators, so windmills, on the port, that it has a tremendous capacity to generate energy to cover the port needs. In some cases, if I remember correctly, and this I would have to check to give you the 100% correct information, that can be a surplus that can be later sold or passed to the urban network in order to provide green energy. So this is also an important example, and I think we're going to see these more and more in different places. Then when we talk all the time when we talk about the offshore wind farms, this is a classic example of cooperation, because the problem that we have with sustainable energy generated by the wind is the fact that it's difficult to storage, so it has to be used. The majority of the offshore wind farms are not really producing the energy for the port authority itself, but mostly for the urban environment. However, the assembling and the connection of these wind farms with the broader network, it is very often done via the ports.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I am very sorry that I arrived so late.
No, don't worry. Thank you for your availability and for sharing your thoughts.
If you want to expand any of these questions, please let me know. I would be happy to complement to
Okay.
add more
I will
cases.
contact you. Okay.
I prefer to give you the correct information rather than just saying things that I remember and so on, because, you know,